Now we are going to discuss skin grafting. Before discussing skin grafting, let me tell you what is graft take. Imagine this is the skin graft and I'm going to apply the skin graft over the vascularized recipient bed. So when this skin graft is taken by or accepted by vascularized recipient bed, this is known as graft take. Okay, so what is graft take? Graft take. Clear? It is the acceptance of graft, acceptance of graft by vascularized recipient bed, vascularized recipient bed. Okay, in this graft take there are three phases. First is there is plasma imbibition. After that there is inosculation, and then there is revascularization. Now see, whenever we are going to apply this graft, initially this graft is going to receive its nutrition by diffusion for the first 48 hours. By 4th or 5th day, what happens? The graft and recipient capillaries are aligned together. This is known as inosculation, and after 5 days there is established arterial supply and venous drainage. So what are the phases? Plasma imbibition, inosculation and revascularization. So what are the phases of graft take? Phases of graft take. So there are three phases. This is plasma imbibition, there is inosculation and revascularization. These are the three phases. So in plasma imbibition, we discussed that grafts survive for first 48 hours by diffusion, and there is free absorption of nutrients by diffusion. And in inosculation, donor and recipient capillaries are aligned together, and after 5 days there is established arterial supply and venous drainage. So what are the questions which are important? First, that this plasma imbibition, it occurs for first 48 hours. Okay, and the graft receives nutrition by diffusion. So this is the second question. Okay, inosculation occurs by 4th to 5th day. It occurs by 4th to 5th day, and what happens? There is alignment of capillaries. And after how many days revascularization occurs? So revascularization occurs after 5 days. Now tell me, what are the names of these instruments? So you must be knowing, because this question was asked many times in AIIMS, in NEET. This is Humbee's knife. So what's the name of this knife? This is Humbee's knife. Clear? And what is the use of this Humbee's knife? This is used for harvesting the skin graft. Now if you see this instrument here, it is calibrated. So what thickness you want for the skin grafting, that thickness of the skin graft can be calibrated. Now if you see the second one is, this is electric dermatome. What is the name of this one? This is electric dermatome. Okay, and the use is same. Electric dermatome is also used for harvesting the skin graft, and by this instrument also we can calibrate the skin thickness. So these are the two instruments which are used for skin grafting: Humbee's knife and electric dermatome. After that, questions are asked that what are the types of skin grafting? It is very easy to understand. See, this is the skin. If in the grafting I'm taking, epidermis plus, see here, plus part of dermis. So if in the graft I'm taking epidermis plus part of dermis, it is split thickness skin grafting. And if I'm taking the full thickness of dermis, then it is known as full thickness skin grafting. So what are the types of skin grafting? First is split thickness skin grafting, in short known as STSG. And what is the another name? The another name of this graft is Thiersch. Clear? And the second is full thickness skin grafting, And what is the other name of full thickness skin grafting? It is known as Wolff's. Wolff's. Clear? It is very easy to understand. See, in split thickness skin grafting, you are taking epidermis plus part of dermis, right? It means whatever the donor site is used for skin grafting, that heals spontaneously. And if it heals spontaneously, repeated grafts can be taken. We can take large graft, and here survival is easy. The only problem with split thickness skin grafting is that there is secondary contraction. So graft is going to contract, and if graft is going to contract, because of this, the cosmetic appearance of graft is poor. Clear? So see, what are the differences between split thickness skin grafting and full thickness skin grafting? So first, split thickness skin grafting known as STSG, full thickness skin grafting known as FTSG. This is known as Thiersch, the other name, and the other name of full thickness skin grafting is Wolff's. Clear? So here we discussed that we take epidermis plus part of dermis, epidermis plus part of dermis. Clear? Only part of dermis is taken, that's why here we can take large graft. So large graft can be taken. Here graft survival is easy. Graft survival, that's easy. Donor site heals spontaneously, that's why repeated grafts can be taken. So donor site, it heals spontaneously, and that's why repeated grafts can be taken. We can take repeated grafts. Clear? What is the problem? The problem is that there is graft contraction, and since there is graft contraction, and that's why the cosmetic appearance is poor. So here, because of this, there is poor cosmetic appearance. Simple. And just opposite things are going to occur in full thickness skin grafting. Now see the basic. In full thickness skin grafting, we take epidermis plus full thickness of dermis. So the area or donor site from which you take the graft, there is permanent defect, and if permanent defect is going to occur at the donor site, you cannot take repeated grafts. Second problem, at the donor site there is permanent defect, so either you have to close it with sutures, and if you are going to close it with sutures, it is going to heal with primary intention, and sometimes we are going to leave it and it heals by secondary intention. So what? Repeated grafts cannot be taken, and the donor site develops permanent defect. The advantage is that the graft contraction is lesser, and that's why cosmetic appearance is better. Okay. So what happens in full thickness skin graft? Here we take epidermis plus full thickness of dermis. Here only small graft is taken. So only small graft. Here graft survival is difficult. So graft survival, it's difficult, and donor site develops permanent defect. Donor site, this develops permanent defect. That's why repeated grafts cannot be taken. Repeated grafts cannot be taken. And advantage here, the graft contraction is lesser. So since graft contraction, it's lesser, and that's why cosmetic appearance is better. Clear? Cosmetic appearance is better. This is very, very important. Almost every year skin grafting is asked. Now coming to the donor sites. See from which area we are going to take split thickness skin grafting. First, that area should be covered under clothes, and that site should be having large surface area. So what is the most commonly used donor site for split thickness skin grafting? You must be knowing inner aspect of thigh. So important point, what are the donor sites for split thickness skin grafting? This is asked many times in exam. So first, most commonly it's the inner aspect of thigh. inner aspect of thigh. Okay, apart from inner aspect of thigh, which other areas you can take the skin graft? Split thickness upper arm, flexor aspect of forearm, or from abdominal wall. So other sides are, we can take it from upper arm, we can take it from flexor aspect of forearm, and abdominal wall. Okay, now the donor sites for full thickness skin grafting. In cases of full thickness skin grafting, if you are taking the full thickness skin graft, there should not be any limitation of movement and there should be redundant skin. Clear? So what are the donor sites? If you see the donor sites for full thickness skin grafting, okay, so you can see this, what, upper eyelid, retroauricular region, supraclavicular, antecubital, inframammary, inguinal, genital, gluteal. So what are the sites? This is asked frequently in exam. Upper eyelid, retroauricular region behind the ears, supraclavicular, antecubital, inframammary, inguinal, genital and gluteal. Okay, once this question was asked in AIIMS, that from which of the following sites, yes, the full thickness skin grafting should not be taken. So these are the common sites. See, from axilla we should not take full thickness skin grafting. So from axilla, full thickness skin grafting is not taken. Whenever we are going for full thickness skin grafting, yes, because of better cosmesis, right, we should avoid any kind of color mismatch. Suppose we are using it in the face, right, so the color of graft should be very close to the color of that recipient bed. It should not be like that you are taking the graft from gluteal region and you are applying it over the face. So there should not be any color mismatch. So this is the grafting. Now before discussing the complications of grafting, see how it's done. So imagine this is the recipient bed and this is the graft which is applied. We discussed that there is formation of capillaries and there is revascularization. So if there is relative movement of graft with recipient bed, the newly formed capillaries and vessels are injured, and because of that they will be bleeding. So the blood will be collected between the graft and recipient bed, and if there is hematoma or seroma formation, what happens? The distance between graft and recipient bed is going to increase. So this is going to cause what? Graft failure. What are the other complications? There is one organism whose presence is an absolute contraindication for skin grafting. And which organism? Beta hemolytic streptococci. Why? Beta hemolytic streptococci is going to produce hyaluronidase, and this hyaluronidase is going to destroy the split thickness skin grafting. Clear? So what are the complications of skin grafting? So first is infection. So we discussed presence of which organism is an absolute contraindication. So it's the beta hemolytic streptococci. It's the beta hemolytic streptococci. Clear? The presence of this organism is an absolute contraindication. Why? Because this organism produces what? Hyaluronidase. Clear? And this is going to destroy split thickness skin grafting. Clear? Second, there is mechanical or shear stress. So second complication is mechanical or shear stress. What is the meaning of this statement? Yes, it is the relative motion of graft, means motion of graft in relation to the recipient bed. So how we are going to avoid this mechanical or shear stress? So when the graft is applied, we are going to apply a big bulky dressing. We are using vacuum assisted closure devices. So How we can prevent it? It can be prevented by bolster dressing, by use of light compression wraps, or we can use vacuum assisted closure, devices. Clear? Now the third complication is hematoma or seroma. So hematoma or seroma formation. Clear? So we discussed that whenever there is formation of capillaries, these capillaries are ruptured and there is collection of blood or serous material. Now, how we can prevent this hematoma or seroma formation? So imagine this is the graft, and in this graft we are going to create tiny holes. Clear? So small stab incisions can be given in the graft, and whenever you are going to apply this graft, what happens? Whatever the fluid is collected beneath the graft, it will come out. Clear? So this is known as pie crusting. So creating multiple stab incisions in the graft, and that is known as pie crusting. Clear? And by pie crusting we can prevent hematoma and seroma formation. Pie crusting is making or giving multiple stab incisions in the graft. See how it looks like. So in this image you can see these are the multiple stab incisions given in the skin graft, so that whatever the blood and fluid which is collected beneath the graft, it can come out. So by pie crusting we can prevent hematoma or seroma formation. Now see this image and tell me what is this skin graft. So here you can see the skin graft is stretched, and in this skin graft, can you see there are tiny holes also. So in this skin graft which is stretched, and it is having these tiny splits or tiny holes. So tiny splits are created in the graft so that a small graft can be stretched and it should cover or resurface a larger area. So this is known as meshed skin graft. So what is the name of this graft? It is known as meshed skin graft. Clear? Now see what is the advantage of this meshed skin graft. Sometimes we have to cover a larger surface area, but the graft which is available is small, right? So we perform the meshing so that it can resurface a larger surface area. How? By creating tiny splits. Now via these tiny splits, whatever the fluid which is collected inside, it can regress. Clear? So the fluid collected, it can egress. So there is no hematoma formation or seroma formation. Second advantage, there will be excellent contour matching. So what fluid is going to egress? There is excellent contour matching. Okay, and these tiny splits will be re-epithelialized. How these tiny splits will be re-epithelialized? By secondary intention from the underlying skin. So these tiny splits in this tiny splits are re-epithelialized, okay, by secondary intention. Okay, from the underlying skin. The question which is frequently asked, that what is the ideal meshing ratio? So the ideal meshing ratio should be 1:1.5 to 1.6. So you have to remember what should be the meshing ratio, and the ideal meshing ratio should be 1:1.5 to 1.6, right? So many advantages, but what is the disadvantage? First, you see that this is split thickness skin grafting, and what is the problem of split thickness skin grafting? Secondary contraction, and because of that, what? Poor cosmetic appearance. In this split thickness skin grafting, you created tiny holes also. So because of that, what happens? There is significant graft contraction, and that's why there is poor cosmetic appearance. So there is high secondary contraction because it's the split thickness skin grafting with holes, and because of this, what's the problem? There is poor cosmetic appearance. Poor cosmetic appearance. Now imagine a different situation, a situation in which patient is going to have some kind of musculoskeletal trauma. So because of road traffic accident, if a patient is having musculoskeletal trauma, and imagine there is loss of overlying skin and this joint is exposed. So if there is loss of overlying skin and the joint is exposed, here you cannot apply the skin graft, because for skin grafting the recipient bed should be vascular. If the recipient bed is relatively avascular or hypervascular, there we have to use the vascularized graft or pedicled graft, and this vascularized graft or pedicled graft is known as flap. So for such areas we are going to use flap. So see what is flap. So flap is also known as pedicled graft. Clear? So this is partially or completely isolated segment of tissue. Partially or completely isolated segment. Segment of tissue with its own blood supply. With its own blood supply. Okay. Now, what are the absolute indications for flaps? So see, sometimes when the joint is exposed, we are going to cover that joint with flap. If there is brain, we have to cover the brain. If there is irradiated field, in that case also we are using flap. Patients are having pressure sore, and generally at what sides? At bony prominences. At those sides also we are using flap. And if a patient is having open joints, or we are using some kind of non-biological implants, to cover that also we have to use the flaps. So these are the absolute indications of the flap. Okay. Now, what is the problem if there is radiated vessel or irradiated field? So suppose in this region I am giving radiotherapy. What is the effect of radiotherapy? After radiotherapy, there is obliterative endarteritis. So if there is obliterative endarteritis, can you see the lumen of vessels are going to be compromised. So in that area, the area which received radiotherapy, that area is relatively avascular or hypovascular. So radiated vessel, it leads to hypovascular or relatively avascular recipient bed. And that's why in all these cases we have to use the flap. On the basis of blood supply, there are three types of flaps. One, random, second is axial, and third is free. What is random flap? Random flap is based on random vessel. Random means it is based on subdermal plexus of vessels. And generally what is the use of this random flap? It is used to cover small full thickness defects where we cannot use skin grafting. What is axial flap? Axial flap is based on a named vessel. And what is free flap? Free flap is the type of axial flap in which what we do, we are going to devascularize the flap, and it is revascularized at recipient bed. So when the flap is devascularized from donor site and revascularized at recipient bed, it is known as free. So see the types of flap on the basis of its vascular supply. It is of three types. First, random flap. Second is axial flap, and third is free flap. So random flap rely on low pressure, that is there in subdermal plexus of vessels, and it is used to reconstruct small full thickness defect where skin grafting is not useful. And what is the axial flap? It is based on named vessel. In axial flap there is another question, what is pedicled flap? So imagine if the axial flap remains attached to its proximal blood supply and then it is transposed to a defect. So it is receiving its blood supply from the donor side and it is transposed to a defect. This is known as pedicled flap. After that, certain terms are asked in exam, like what is myocutaneous, what is fasciomyocutaneous, and what is osteomyocutaneous. So if you break the term, you will get the answer. If the flap is myocutaneous, break it. So the components are myo means muscle, cutaneous means skin. If it is fasciomyocutaneous, so what are the components? Fascia plus muscle plus skin. And if it is osteomyocutaneous. What are the components? Periosteum plus muscle plus skin. Okay, so see what is free flap. It is the autogenous transplantation of vascularized tissue. So actually what is done? There is devascularization from donor site and revascularization at the recipient bed. See the diagrammatic representation. So see this first one, this is random flap, and this random flap is based on subdermal plexus of vessels. It is based on subdermal plexus of vessels. Now if you see this axial flap, it is based on a named vessel. So axial flap, it is based on a named vessel. Now see what is free flap. This free flap, it is devascularized from donor site, and can you see here? Here it is being revascularized. So we are going for microsurgical anastomosis. So this is being revascularized. So this is free flap. One by one we are going to discuss. First we are going to discuss the types of random flap. First is VY flap. So what are the types of random flap? So this is looking like V. Initial the incision, and after suturing it's looking like Y. So that's why it is also known as VY plasty. So this is known as VY plasty. Clear? And what is the use of this VY plasty? This is mainly used for fingertips and extremities. So the use, it is used for fingertips and extremities. Second is Z plasty. Now it's very easy to understand. See, this is Z plasty. So if you give, so it's very easy to understand. This is Z plasty. So if you see, initially the incision is like Z, and see, this is A, this is B, this is C, and this is D. What we will do, and can you see the angle? Appreciate the angle. It is 60 degrees. Now what we do, we take this C to A and we take this B to D. So can you see here? The C is taken to A, point A, and D is taken to point D, and after that we are going to perform the suturing. So final diagram is something like this. So what you have seen here, that this Z plasty is mainly used for lengthening of scar and lengthening of tissue. And can you see, can you appreciate how much is the lengthening here? 75% increase in length by this Z plasty. Clear? So this Z plasty mainly used for lengthening. It is mainly used for lengthening of tissues and scars. Now the third is rhomboid flap, and this was asked many times in AIIMS and NEET. So see, rhomboid flap. What we do in rhomboid flap and what are the uses. So here you can see, this is A, this is B, and this is C. Clear? This is A dash, this is B dash, this is C dash, and this is C double dash. Right? Now what we are going to do in this rhomboid flap, in this you can see that this A is being taken to A dash, B is being taken to B dash, and C dash is being taken to C double dash. Clear? So what is the use of this rhomboid flap? It is used for the defects mainly involving cheek and flat surface. Cheek, which malignancy is common? Basal cell carcinoma. So if a patient is having basal cell carcinoma of cheek, we are using rhomboid flap for reconstruction. And there was one question in AIIMS that if a patient is having pilonidal sinus, after excision of pilonidal sinus, which flap can be used to cover the defect? Rhomboid flap. Clear? So this is used to cover the defect. So used for defects of cheek and defects involving flat surfaces. Defects involving flat surfaces. So example, for basal cell carcinoma we use rhomboid flap, and for pilonidal sinus, also we can use rhomboid flap. So in this image you can see that this patient is having basal cell carcinoma here. Clear? So what? After excision of this malignancy, we are using what? This rhomboid flap, and see, we are going to cover the defect. So these are the types of random flaps. Now we are going to discuss axial flaps. Now this is one type of axial flap. What is the name of this flap? Here you can see that this is latissimus dorsi muscle. The muscle and the skin is excised, and here can you see we have created a tunnel, and via this tunnel this flap is being taken to the breast and it is used for breast reconstruction. So what is the name of this flap? This is LD flap or latissimus dorsi flap, and this latissimus dorsi flap is based on which vessel? Thoracodorsal vessels. So the name of this flap, this is LD flap, also known as latissimus dorsi flap, and it is based on thoracodorsal vessels. Thoracodorsal vessels. Clear? And you know that this is used for breast reconstruction. Now see here, this patient is having what? Scarring in this region. Clear? And we have to excise this scar. If we are going to excise this scar, this area will develop a defect and we have to cover that defect. So how we are going to cover this? Can you see this region is deltoid and this is pectoral. So this is deltoid muscle, this is pectoral. So if I am going to take graft from this region, this is known as deltopectoral graft. Deltopectoral graft, and it is based on which vessel? It is based on perforators of which artery? Internal mammary artery. So what is the name of this flap? This is deltopectoral flap, also known as DP flap, and it is based on perforators of internal mammary artery. Perforators of internal mammary artery. Clear? So here you can see we have taken this graft, so we are going to cover the defect and it is being closed. So this is deltopectoral flap. Now this was an image based question in one of the AIIMS exam, right? See what is done here. Here you notice that this patient develops what? The defect of cheek and lower lip. So you notice there is defect of cheek and lower lip, and this defect is being covered from which area? If you notice this area, if you notice here, there is scar. It means we have taken the flap from this pectoralis major flap, and we have taken the muscle as well as skin. So if muscle and skin both are taken, it is known as myocutaneous flap, and if it is taken from pectoralis major, the name is pectoralis major myocutaneous flap. In short, this is known as PMMC flap. So this is pectoralis major myocutaneous flap, and it is based on which vessel? So it is based on pectoral branches of thoracoacromial vessels. So this is very important. It is based on pectoral branches of thoracoacromial vessels. Thoracoacromial vessels. Simple. Now this question is asked frequently in exam, that for head and neck defects, most commonly used flap. What is the most commonly used flap used for reconstruction of defects in head and neck? And it is PMMC flap, pectoralis major myocutaneous flap. You have seen that ad in movie theaters. Before movie there is one ad that my name is Mukesh, I'm 23 years old. That patient was also having what? Oral cavity malignancies, and this is very common in UP and Bihar because of gutka or tobacco. So if after excision of malignancy there is some kind of defect in head and neck region, we are going to cover it with pectoralis major myocutaneous flap. Now see this diagram. Here you notice that I have taken the muscle along with the skin. From which region? From the rectus abdominis. So what is the name of this flap? The name of this flap is TRAM flap. This is transverse rectus abdominis muscle flap. This is TRAM flap. Now see, this transverse rectus abdominis muscle, it receives its blood supply from superior epigastric from above and inferior epigastric from below. So it can be based on any of these, and sometimes if the TRAM flap is based on both superior epigastric as well as inferior epigastric, this is known as supercharged TRAM. So generally it can be based on superior epigastric artery or inferior epigastric artery, and if it is based on both, vessels, it is known as supercharged tram. So this is supercharged tram. Okay, now what is done in this case? See here it is based on inferior epigastric artery or inferior epigastric vessels, and after that you are going to notice that what we are going to revascularize this graft with what? Internal memory, artery and vein. Clear? And this anastomosis is done. Clear? So this tram flap is most commonly used flap for breast reconstruction. Tram flap is most commonly used flap for breast reconstruction, but it is not the best flap. Why? Because if you are going to cut the muscle from this area, after removing or cutting the muscle, there is weakness in this region, and because of this weakness, what will happen? There is hernia. That's why tram is most commonly used flap for breast reconstruction, but the best flap for breast reconstruction is DIEP flap, which is not having muscle. What is the full form of DIEP flap? It is deep inferior epigastric perforator flap. So here you can see this is DIEP flap. First and very important question, this is the best flap for breast reconstruction. Best flap for breast reconstruction. Okay, now see what is the difference between DIEP and tram flap. Here you notice that it is based on this epigastric artery perforator, inferior epigastric artery perforator, and you notice that in this flap only skin and fat is being taken. So only skin and flap is taken, and what kind of flap it is? It is free flap. So it is devascularized at donor site, revascularized at recipient bed. So devascularized from donor site, here you can see that it is revascularized at recipient bed. So you notice that there is only skin and fat with blood vessels. So what? The muscle is spared, and since the muscle is spared, there is no weakness, no hernia. So DIEP flap is the best flap for breast reconstruction. Now we are going to discuss ulcer. So what is the definition of ulcer? Ulcer is break in the continuity of surface epithelium or mucous membrane. It is the break in continuity of surface epithelium or mucous membrane. So ulcer is break in continuity. Break in continuity of surface epithelium or mucous membrane. Clear? So what is the cause of break in continuity of surface epithelium or mucous membrane? The cause of this break is either molecular death or traumatic removal, right? So either it's caused by molecular death of surface epithelium, molecular death, or traumatic removal. Clear? So you must be knowing that, and you must have seen that certain patients are having aphthous ulcers, peptic ulcers, tubercular ulcers, typhoid ulcers, right? So lots of questions are asked that what are the parts of ulcers, and even in Viva this question is frequently asked. So see, what are the parts of ulcer? Now in this diagram you can see what are the parts of ulcer. There is base, floor, edge and margin. So what is base? Base is the surface on which ulcer rests. So it is the surface on which ulcer rests. After that you can see that here is the floor. So what is the floor? Floor is the exposed surface of ulcer. It is the exposed surface of ulcer. Now here you can see that this is the normal epithelium. This region is normal epithelium, and this is the part of ulcer. So you can see that there is a junction between normal epithelium and ulcer, and this junction is known as what? Margin. Okay, and what is this edge? If you see, the edge is area between margin and floor. Okay, so one by one, what is the base? It is the surface on which ulcer rests. Clear? So generally base is formed by, if there is exposed surface, that is floor. So beneath floor, what is located? It is formed by muscle or bone. So generally base is formed by muscle or bone. Clear? Okay, so when you see the ulcer, whatever the exposed surface is there, sometimes it contains slough, sometimes it contains pus, sometimes it contains pink granulation tissue. So that is what? Floor. So what is floor? Floor is the exposed surface of ulcer. It is the exposed surface of ulcer. What is the margin? So we discussed, it is the junction between ulcer and normal epithelium. Ulcer and normal epithelium. So this region is normal epithelium. And what is edge? You can see this edge is an area between margin and floor. So this edge is area between margin and floor. Margin and floor. Okay. Now it is very easy to remember the parts of ulcer. Now imagine this room as an ulcer. Okay. So what is there in the floor? In the floor you can see tiles. So tiles is floor, means that is the exposed surface. What is base? Means the area which is located or surface which is located beneath tiles. So beneath tiles, what is there? Concrete. So concrete is going to form the base. Tiles are going to form the floor, and the walls of the room are going to form the edge, and this wall is going to meet the ceiling. Where it is going to meet the ceiling is the junction where it is going to meet with the ceiling, and that is known as what? Margin. So these are the parts of ulcer. It's very important, frequently asked in exam. After that, one-liner questions are asked in relation to types of edge and in which cases these kinds of edges are seen. So if you see this diagram, what kind of edge you can see here? Here you can see the sloping edge, and this sloping edge is seen in. So you have seen healing ulcer or varicose venous ulcers seen in Gators region having pink granulation tissue. So these ulcers are having sloping edge. So sloping edge is seen in healing ulcer and varicose ulcer. It is seen in healing ulcer and varicose ulcer. Okay. Now see here. Here you can see that there are punched out. Can you see? Punched out edges. And these kind of punched out edges are typically seen in arterial ulcers or ischemic ulcers, where the arterial supply is compromised. Clear? So this is punched out edges. Punched out edges, and the punched out edge is seen in arterial ulcer or ischemic ulcer. Arterial ulcer or ischemic ulcer. Okay. After that, can you see what kind of edge is this? Can you see? It is located here. So this is undermined, and the undermined edge is a typical feature of tubercular ulcer. Clear? So this is undermined edge, and undermined edge is the typical feature of tubercular ulcer, right? So it is typical feature of tubercular ulcer. Now see this is rolled edge. Can you see this? This is rolled edge, and this rolled edge is seen in basal cell carcinoma. In basal cell carcinoma, there is another feature which is seen, that is pearly white edges. Okay, so this is rolled edge, and this rolled edge is seen in basal cell carcinoma. It is seen in basal cell carcinoma, and we discussed in basal cell carcinoma, pearly white edges are also seen. Pearly white edges. Okay. Now if you see this one here, you notice that there is growth of tissue outwards means towards the surface, and whenever there is growth of tissue outwards or towards the surface, it is the classical feature of which malignancy? Squamous cell carcinoma. So here tumor grows towards the surface, and this is known as what? Everted edges. So this is everted edges, and everted edges are seen in, yes, squamous cell carcinoma. So we discussed there is growth towards surface or outward growth. Apart from everted edges, what kind of base is seen? Base in basal cell carcinoma, in squamous cell carcinoma, and there is indurated base. This is the characteristic feature. So in squamous cell carcinoma, there are everted edges, and what kind of base? Indurated base. Now see this picture and tell me what is the diagnosis. So can you see here the tumor is having outward growth towards surface. It means it is a type of squamous cell carcinoma. And what is the second clue in the picture? You can see that here there is scar. Can you see? There is presence of scar. So there is a malignancy which is arising from some old scar, and which is squamous cell carcinoma. So what is this kind of ulcer? This is Marjolin's ulcer. So what is this? The diagnosis is Marjolin's ulcer. This is frequently asked in exam, and you know that Marjolin's ulcer is a low grade squamous cell carcinoma. It is low grade squamous cell carcinoma, and it arises from long standing scar or chronic benign ulcer. So it arises from long standing scar or chronic benign ulcer. Chronic benign ulcer. Okay, so generally see from which areas or from which scars it is going to develop. So see here, this long standing scar, generally it is arising from burn scar. So Marjolin's ulcer is arising from burn scar. And chronic benign ulcer, what do you mean by chronic benign ulcer, and in which ulcers this malignancy is seen? It is seen in long standing deep venous ulcer, if the patient is having chronic post-traumatic ulcer, or if there is radiation induced ulcer. So from these ulcers you will find that patient might develop what? Marjolin's ulcer. And if a patient is having chronic discharging osteomyelitic sinus, even chronic discharging osteomyelitic sinus also increase the risk of Marjolin's ulcer. So one basic thing is clear here, that generally it is arising from scar, long standing scar, and you know that in scar nerves, vessels, lymphatics are destroyed. So if in the scar nerves, vessels and lymphatics are destroyed, so what will be the characteristic features of the ulcer? If there are no nerves, it means it will be painless. If there are no vessels, it means it is avascular. And if malignancy is relatively avascular, it means it is slow growing and radio resistant. Why radio resistant? Because we discussed that radiotherapy causes obliterative end arteritis of vessel to manifest its effect, and if malignancy is already avascular, what? It will be radio resistant. Third problem, if there is no lymphatics or lymphatics are destroyed, it means it is not associated with lymph node metastasis. Clear? So it is just based on common sense and it is very easy to remember. See the characteristic features. Since it is arising from scar, and in the scar, what? Nerves are damaged. That's why it is painless. It's the painless ulcer. Second, vessels. Vessels are also destroyed in scar, and that's why it is relatively avascular. And if the tumor is avascular, it means it is slow growing. This is slow growing and radio resistant. This is radio resistant. Simple. After that, lymphatics are also destroyed. So since lymphatics are destroyed, it means there is no lymph node metastasis, right? So no lymph node metastasis. These points are clear. Now see how we are going to make the diagnosis. Diagnosis of squamous cell carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma, malignant melanoma, soft tissue sarcoma. In all these cases, how we make the diagnosis? Biopsy. So here also we make the diagnosis by biopsy. We discussed that the tumor or this kind of ulcer is relatively avascular. So and it's a type of squamous cell carcinoma. So we have to go for wide local excision, right? So whenever we go for wide local excision, after excision there will be the defect, development of defect at the site of ulcer. So how you will close the defect? You have to close that defect with the help of flap. Clear? So we have to go for wide local excision with flap cover. Second question, in this tumor or in this malignancy or in this marginal ulcer, we have to give radiotherapy or not? So we should not give radiotherapy. Why? Because we discussed that what kind of tumor is this? It is radio resistant. And second, since the site is relatively avascular where flap is used, and if you will use radiotherapy in the flap also, there will be obliterative endarteritis. Clear? So how we make the diagnosis? It is diagnosed by biopsy. And what's the treatment? It's the wide local excision with flap cover. We have to cover the defect with flap. And what should be avoided? Avoid radiotherapy. Radiotherapy should be avoided because this is radio resistant and you don't want obliterative endarteritis in the arteries of flap. Now we are going to discuss skin malignancies. Okay, so first question, what is the most common type of skin malignancy? And it is basal cell carcinoma followed by squamous cell carcinoma followed by malignant melanoma. Now see the twist. Most common skin malignancy in darkly pigmented races. And in darkly pigmented races like Negroes, what is the most common malignancy? It is the squamous cell carcinoma. So two questions. First, most common skin malignancy. What's the most common skin malignancy? And that is basal cell carcinoma followed by squamous cell carcinoma followed by malignant melanoma. And most common skin malignancy in darkly pigmented races. Darkly pigmented races. And then the answer becomes squamous cell carcinoma. So read the question carefully. One by one we are going to discuss. First we are going to discuss basal cell carcinoma. Clear? So what is the name? It is basal cell carcinoma. It means from which layer it is going to arise. So it arises from basal layer of epidermis. So first easy question. It arises from basal layer of epidermis. Clear? What are the other names of basal cell carcinoma? It is also known as rodent ulcer. Rodent ulcer. And it is also known as tear cancer. Tear cancer. What is the most common site? This was asked many times. It was asked in AIIMS. The most common site is nose followed by inner canthus. In AIIMS exam, nose was not mentioned in the option, and that's why for that question the correct answer was inner canthus. So the most common site is and that's nose followed by inner canthus. Clear? Okay. Now see why it is known as rodent ulcer. If you have seen a patient of basal cell carcinoma, generally this basal cell carcinoma, it is going to cause destruction of tissues locally. So it is going to destroy tissue locally without any evidence of distant metastasis. So this is locally malignant, and that's why it is known as rodent ulcer. Second, why it is known as tear cancer? See, if you see this patient, clear? This is the ear lobule. So if we are going to join the corner of mouth to the ear lobule, so if we are going to join these two by a line, generally what happens? The malignancy is generally seen over this region. Means this malignancy is seen above the line joining ear lobule to the corner of mouth, where the region where tear flows, and that's why it is known as what? Tear cancer. Clear? So since it is mainly seen in the region located above the line joining earlobule to the corner of mouth. That's why it's known as tear cancer. 2-3 times this question was asked in pathology as well as in surgery in AIIMS in the form of image based question. Now see the tumor. This was the question asked in AIIMS. Clear? So what you can see here, you can notice that there is presence of pearly white nodules, and if you can see on the surface there is presence of telangiectatic or dilated vessels. So there is presence of telangiectatic or dilated vessels with pearly white nodules in the periphery. And if you see this second picture here, you notice that there is presence of pearly white nodules. Simultaneously, there is central depression, and this is known as umbilication. So there is necrosis in the center and presence of pearly white nodules in the periphery. This is known as central depression with umbilication, and there is presence of pearly white nodules in the periphery. So this is the classical description of which type of basal cell carcinoma. It is seen in nodular variety. So in pathology, this question is also asked that what are the types of basal cell carcinoma? There are 4 types: nodular, pigmented, cystic and superficial. Nodular, pigmented, cystic and superficial. Clear? So which one is the most common type? The most common type is nodular. And we discussed what is the classical feature of nodular variety. There is presence of pearly white nodules in the periphery, dilated vessels over the surface, that is known as telangiectatic vessels, and there is central depression with umbilication. Now how we are going to make the diagnosis? If you see this ulcer, okay, generally there is presence of necrosis in the center. That's why we are going to take the biopsy from the edge. So we take the biopsy from the edge. That's why what is the investigation of choice? It's the wedge biopsy. So what is the investigation of choice for diagnosis? Wedge biopsy. We discussed that in basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, malignant melanoma, soft tissue sarcoma, what we do? We go for wide local excision, and how much margin? Generally we take 2 cm. So usually, see the management. So if the basal cell carcinoma is involving trunk or extremity, if it is involving trunk or extremity, in these cases we go for wide local excision with 2 cm margin. Clear? So if there is small tumor, small basal cell carcinoma involving trunk or extremity, we can go for wide local excision with 2 cm margin. But be careful, if a patient is having large aggressive tumors involving cosmetic areas, vital areas, or patient is having recurrent tumors, in those cases we go for Mohs micrographic surgery. So what is the second treatment options we have? We go for Mohs micrographic surgery. Clear? And in which cases this Mohs micrographic surgery is done? If the patient is having large aggressive tumors involving vital areas and cosmetic areas, clear? Our patient is having recurrent tumors, there is recurrent presence of recurrent tumor. In that case we go for Mohs micrographic surgery. Just imagine that a patient is having malignancy at inner canthus, and what is the treatment? Wide local excision with 2 cm margin. So if you go for wide local excision with 2 cm margin, you have to remove the eyeball also, nose also. So this is cosmetic area. Clear? So in this region we go for Mohs micrographic surgery. Mohs micrographic surgery is not only used for basal cell carcinoma, it is also used for squamous cell carcinoma, and the indications are also similar in squamous cell carcinoma. Like in squamous cell carcinoma, if the tumor is large, aggressive, involving cosmetic areas or vital areas, or there is recurrent tumor, we go for Mohs micrographic surgery. There was one question in NEET PG that if there is basal cell carcinoma present at the tip of nose, we go for wide local excision, and with which flap we are going to cover it? It is which kind of flap is used for this kind of basal cell carcinoma which is present at the tip of nose? It is the bilobed flap. So Patient is having basal cell carcinoma at tip of nose. Clear? So which flap is used? You have to remember the name, bilobed flap. So we use bilobed flap. Now we are going to discuss squamous cell carcinoma, and we discussed that this is the second most common malignancy of skin, and this is the most common malignancy of skin in darkly pigmented races or Negroes. Basal cell carcinoma was arising from basal layer of epidermis, and this is arising from prickle cell layer. It is arising from prickle cell layer of epidermis. Clear? Now we discussed what is the characteristic feature of this tumor. The tumor, there is outward growth. See, so in this picture you can see there is growth towards surface, outward growth. That's why what kind of edges are seen? There is presence of everted edges. Okay, so in this tumor there is outward growth. Now what is the risk factor? One of the most common causative factor for squamous cell carcinoma is sunlight. So sunlight. Okay, now see the problem. Generally the exposed part of body, whatever the exposed part of body is there, exposed part to the sunlight, in that areas there is high chance of development of squamous cell carcinoma. So now just see which part of my body is exposed. So you can see these hands are exposed and head and neck. Clear? So what are the common sites for squamous cell carcinoma? You can see back of hand, ears, cheeks and the lower lip. So sunlight is one of the most common causative factor, and because of this exposed part of body are the common sites. So what are those exposed parts? Ears, cheeks, lower lip and back of hand. Lower lip and back of hands. Okay, so these are the common sites. Now see the other predisposing factors. So what are the predisposing factors for squamous cell carcinoma? So the predisposing factors are senile or actinic keratosis. We discussed sunlight, radiation exposure, human papilloma virus infection. HPV infection is a common risk factor and which is responsible for squamous cell carcinoma of oral cavity, esophagus, cervix, penis. Immunocompromised state or HIV status, it also increases the risk of squamous cell carcinoma. And if there is arsenic exposure, it also increases the risk. So these are the predisposing factors for squamous cell carcinoma. Many questions are asked in pathology also related to squamous cell carcinoma. What are the pathological characteristics? So in squamous cell carcinoma, what you see cell nest, keratin pearl or epithelial pearl. So there is epithelial pearl or keratin pearl. Now, what is the presentation of squamous cell carcinoma? If you have seen, in majority of cases, patients are having ulcer. So the most common presentation or most common variety is ulcerative variety. Sometimes patients are having nodules also. Okay, so see the presentation, clinical features. So most common presentation is ulcer, and sometimes there is presence of nodules also. We discussed what kind of ulcer and what kind of edges. So there is presence of everted edges, and these patients are having indurated base. So another important characteristic, patients have everted edges in the ulcer and there is indurated base. Clear? Diagnosis is very similar to basal cell carcinoma. Here also we go for wedge biopsy. So diagnosis, we go for wedge biopsy, and the treatment is also similar. If a patient is having non-invasive small squamous cell carcinoma, so treatment. If it is small and non-invasive, what is the preferred treatment? So we go for wide local excision. And how much margin? Usually we take 2 centimeter margin. So generally these are for small, non-invasive squamous cell carcinoma. And if patient is having large aggressive squamous cell carcinoma involving vital areas, cosmetic areas, or patients are having recurrent tumors, in that case we go for Mohs micrographic surgery. Clear? So second treatment option we have is the Mohs micrographic surgery. Clear? And in which case, if patient is having large aggressive tumor which are involving vital areas or cosmetic areas, right, or patient is having recurrent tumors. So see, what is done in Mohs micrographic surgery? Imagine a patient is having basal cell carcinoma at inner canthus. So here, serial excision of tissues is done in small increments. So we are going to remove 1 mm of tissue, and simultaneously this is examined microscopically by pathologist. And if pathologist is going to tell that sir, still one margin is not free, I have to remove another 1 mm. Clear? So what is the advantage? What is the disadvantage? Advantage that on spot you have this confirmation whether the removed margin is tumor free or it is positive. It means the advantage is there is minimal loss of tissues and there is low recurrence rate. But what is the disadvantage? That it is a very lengthy procedure. Okay. So see the important points related to Mohs micrographic surgery. It is the serial excision of tumor in small increments. Serial excision of tumor in small increments, and after excision there is immediate microscopic analysis. So after that there is immediate microscopic analysis to ensure complete tumor removal. Clear? So what is the advantage of this Mohs micrographic surgery? First, all margins are evaluated. All margins of tumor are evaluated. That's why having lesser recurrence rate and there is minimal loss of uninvolved tissue. Minimal loss of uninvolved tissue. But what is the disadvantage? That it's a lengthy procedure and the indications are similar. It is used for both basal cell and squamous cell carcinoma. And what are the indications? Large aggressive tumors involving cosmetic areas, vital areas, and it is used for recurrent tumors. Now we are going to discuss malignant melanoma. Malignant melanoma is asked in surgery as well as in skin, and it's very important. So malignant melanoma, right? So this malignant melanoma is caused by malignant transformation of what? Melanocytes. Which melanocytes? This is the catchy word which is asked in exam. Junctional melanocytes. Clear? So it is caused by malignant transformation of which melanocytes? Junctional melanocytes. Clear? And these junctional melanocytes, what is the location? These are located at junction. Which junction? Dermoepidermal junction. So junctional melanocytes located at dermoepidermal junction. Dermoepidermal junction. Clear? Now see, what is the most common site in males and what is the most common site in females? In males it's the back or trunk, and in females it's the lower extremity. So the most common site in males and in females. In males it's back and trunk, right? And in the females it's the lower extremity. It's the lower extremity, right? In NEET PG this question was asked and markers were given related to malignant melanoma. Question was asked that which markers are positive and which markers are negative. You are supposed to remember. So in malignant melanoma it is positive for S100, HMB45 and Vimentin. S100, HMB45 and Vimentin. It is positive. And which one is negative? Cytokeratin 20, it's negative. This was the question of NEET. Clear? So sometimes in the question various combinations are given, you have to choose the correct combination. Okay, so S100 HMP45 Y maintain is positive, cytokeratin 20 is negative. Now coming to the risk factors. What are the risk factors for malignant melanoma? So we have read this in biochemistry that xeroderma pigmentosum or ultraviolet radiation exposure or history of sunburn, all these are risk factors. Second, you have seen many people who are having moles in the body. So the risk of malignancy means risk of malignant melanoma increases with number of moles in the body, and it increases with larger size of the mole. So if multiple melanocytic nevi are there, it is also a risk factor, and if a patient is having large nevus, it is also a risk factor. So what are the risk factors? It's the xeroderma pigmentosum, ultraviolet radiation exposure. If patient is having positive family history, this also increase the risk. And certain patients have dysplastic nevus, or sometimes you have seen patient is having large black colored patch in the trunk. So giant congenital melanocytic nevus. If a patient is having multiple melanocytic nevi, or if there is history of sunburn, all these are the risk factors for malignant melanoma. Now coming to the types of malignant melanoma. So what is the most common type? Superficial spreading. Name is self-explanatory. It is superficial spreading, so spreads on the surface. Overall, it is most common type. And what is the most common site? Torso or trunk. So this is most common type of malignant melanoma, and the most common site is torso or trunk. Clear? After that, there is nodular. Nodular is second most common, and this is most malignant. So this is second most common type, and it is most malignant. Clear? Now see, it's very easy to understand. We discuss superficial spreading is spreading superficially. Generally, malignant melanoma is having two kinds of growth. Can you see? There is horizontal growth and there is vertical growth. So the tumor is having horizontal growth and there is vertical growth. Tumors which are having vertical growth, those tumors are more malignant, and these tumors are having increased incidence of distant metastasis. What is the problem with this nodular melanoma? That it is having only vertical phase. So it is having only vertical growth, and because of this vertical growth, it is most malignant. Clear? What is the most common site? It is head and neck. So the most common site of nodular melanoma is head and neck. Least malignant is lentigo maligna. This is least malignant, and generally this lentigo maligna is slow growing, seen in elderly, especially in which part? Sun exposed parts of the body. Clear? So third is lentigo maligna. Clear? This is least malignant. Okay, and it was asked in a latest exam. It is seen in elderly, especially in which parts of body? Sun exposed areas. It is seen in sun exposed areas. So what are those sun exposed areas? Yes, face, right? So it is seen in what? Face. And least common and the type which is having worse prognosis, that is acral lentiginous. So the fourth type is acral lentiginous. Clear? So this is least common type having worse prognosis, right? What is the question which is asked about this acral lentiginous? The name is acral. So what is the most common site? Acral means it is seen in lower extremity. Where exactly? Under the great toenail. So the most common site is sole, under great toenail. It is the sole. Where exactly? Under great toenail. Clear? So it is the most common site. Now see how this malignant melanoma looks like. It is characterized by A, B, C, D, E. A means asymmetry. Can you see? Asymmetry. B means border irregularity. C means, can you see this color, and this color? There is color variation. D means change of diameter more than 6 mm. And E means evolution of size, shape and color. So this question was asked in both AIIMS and NEET, and the question was, which of the tumor is characterized by A, B, C, D, E? So A, B, C, D, E is used for description of which tumor, and it is used for malignant melanoma. What is this A, B, C, D, E? So see, this is a benign tumor and this is malignant melanoma. So first you can see this is symmetrical, and here there is asymmetry, means the two sides do not match. So first there is asymmetry. B, if you see the borders, can you see here the borders are even and here uneven. So there is asymmetry, border irregularity. Can you see one color, and here can you see the color? There is color variation. D, smaller than 6 mm, and here it is larger than 6 mm. So the change in diameter is more than 6 mm. And see, this is an ordinary mole, and this is, there is E, evolution of what? Or change in size, shape or color. So I'm repeating, this is important. There is asymmetry, border irregularity, color variation, change in diameter more than 6 mm, and evolution of size, shape or color. Now, what is the most common route of spread in malignant melanoma? The most common route is lymphatic. And what is the most common site of metastasis? It is liver. What is the special feature of this malignant melanoma? That in metastasis usually more than one organ is affected. So what? It is going to involve liver, it is going to involve spleen, it is going to involve mesentery, small bowel. So usually multiple organs are involved. How we are going to make the diagnosis? See, if the lesion is small, so we go for excisional biopsy. And if there is large patch, if there is large melanoma, in that case we go for incisional biopsy. Clear? So for small lesions, we go for excisional biopsy, and for large lesions we go for incisional biopsy. Clear? Now the treatment protocol. So see the management. The basic principle of management of malignant melanoma, we discussed that we go for what? Wide local excision. Apart from wide local excision, we go for sentinel lymph node biopsy also. Clear? So what's the treatment? Here we go for wide local excision with 2 cm margin plus sentinel lymph node biopsy. Clear? Now see, this margin is variable. Usually it is 2 cm, but it can be from 1 to 3 cm, and the margin depends on tumor thickness and depth of invasion. So what? It depends on tumor thickness and depth of invasion. Okay, so tumor thickness and depth of invasion. Imagine if the tumor thickness is less than 1 mm, so how much margin is taken? 1 cm. If the tumor thickness is 1 to 4 mm, so how much margin is taken? 2 cm. And whenever the tumor thickness is more than 4 mm, in that case 3 cm margin is taken. Clear? So what you have to remember, 2 cm. And if specifically in question it is asked if tumor thickness is given, then it varies from 1 to 3 cm. You know that this malignant melanoma is radio-resistant tumor, and we have only one chemotherapy agent which is having some kind of response. So which agent? It is the interferon alpha 2b. It is a radio-resistant tumor, and for chemotherapy we use is the interferon alpha 2b. This is the agent which is used. Now in relation to malignant melanoma, there are 2 questions which are asked. One is Clark levels, and second is Breslow's depth of invasion or Breslow's staging. So one by one we are going to discuss. First, Clark levels in malignant melanoma. So there are 5 levels. Clark levels. So there are 5 levels, 5 types. Now see, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and it is based on depth of invasion. Based on depth of invasion means, grossly speaking, it is based on the layer which is involved. So in type 1 there is invasion of epidermis. Invasion of epidermis. In type 2 there is invasion of papillary dermis. Papillary dermis. In type 3 there is involvement or invasion of interface. Interface means the junction between papillary dermis and reticular dermis. So invasion of interface or junction between papillary dermis and reticular dermis. And in type 4 there is invasion of reticular dermis, and type 5 there is invasion of subcutaneous tissue. Clear? So this is very easy to remember. What is the mnemonic? You can see appears. So how to remember? Appears. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. E means epidermis, P means papillary dermis, I means interface, R means reticular dermis, S means subcutaneous tissue. So you can easily mark the correct answer by this mnemonic, appears. Better than Clark levels is the Breslow staging. Why? Because it is based on actual measurement of deepest invasion from granular layer. So Breslow staging is preferred over Clark's. Clear? And why? Because it is based on actual measurement of deepest invasion from granular layer. Deepest invasion from granular layer. Okay? This staging is different in Bailey. Bailey is having certain errors related to this staging. So I am discussing the staging which is given in DVita, right? So see, what is the stage 1? When the depth of invasion is less than 0.75 mm. What is the stage 2? It is 0.75 to 1.5 mm depth of invasion. And what is stage 3? It is 1.6 mm to 4 mm. And what is stage 4? If the depth of invasion is more than 4 mm. Clear? Now see the prognostic factors in malignant melanoma. So what are the prognostic factors in malignant melanoma? So obviously what is the most important prognostic factor, and that is depth of invasion. Clear? So the most important prognostic factor is depth of invasion. Other prognostic factors are ulceration, lymph node metastasis, satellite nodules and distant metastasis. So depth of ulceration, depth of invasion, ulceration, lymph node metastasis, satellite nodules and distant metastasis. How to remember? It's very easy, and the mnemonic is dull sad. Can you see? Dull sad. So what is the most important prognostic factor? And that is depth of invasion. Now we are going to discuss the variants of malignant melanoma. So first is amelanotic melanoma. What's the name? Amelanotic melanoma. Okay, so this term is self-explanatory, that this is amelanotic. It means it is arising from the cells which do not make the melanin. And if the cells are not making melanin, and that's why if the cell is not making melanin, the color of this melanoma will not be black. It can be pink, it can be red, it can be purple, it can be of normal skin color, but what? The color won't be black. And this is why there is delay in diagnosis, because this melanoma is not of black color, so there is delay in diagnosis. And if there is delay in diagnosis, it is associated with poor prognosis. Okay, so see the important points. Amelanotic means it is arising from the cells which do not make melanin. Do not make melanin. And if cells do not make melanin, the color is it's not black. What is the color? It can be pink, it can be red, it can be purple, or it can be of normal skin color, but the color is not black. Now see, this is one amelanotic melanoma. Can you see? And see the color? The color is red. So what happens? Since the color is not black, it leads to delay in diagnosis. And if there is delay in diagnosis, what is the problem? There is increased risk of recurrence. So two problems. One is there is delay in diagnosis, and even if you go for excision, there is increased risk of recurrence. So there is delay in diagnosis and increased risk of recurrence, and because of this, in comparison to the normal melanoma, which is of black color, it is associated with poor prognosis. Clear? So amelanotic melanoma is having poor prognosis. And can you see the shape? Generally the shape is irregular, asymmetrical. So the shape is, it is asymmetrical, and there is irregular faintly pigmented border. So it is asymmetrical and there is irregular faintly pigmented border in amelanotic melanoma. So how you remember amelanotic? So it is arising from the cells which are not going to produce the melanin, and color is not black. Second variant is desmoplastic melanoma. So second variant, it is desmoplastic melanoma. Okay, now see, this desmoplastic melanoma is more common in head and neck region. And what is another special feature of this desmoplastic melanoma? That this desmoplastic melanoma is associated with perineural invasion. In salivary gland tumors, we discussed that there is a tumor, salivary gland tumor, which is having property of perineural invasion. What was that tumor? Adenoid cystic carcinoma. So this desmoplastic melanoma is also having that property. So see the picture. This patient is having desmoplastic melanoma, and it is seen in head and neck region. What is the special property? This tumor is having perineural invasion. Clear? In desmoplastic melanoma, what is the treatment? Wide local excision. So we have to take the sufficient margin. Otherwise, what will happen? If we are not going to take sufficient margin, in those cases there is increased risk of recurrence. So the treatment is wide local excision, right? If wide local excision is not done, it is associated with increased risk of recurrence. So amelanotic melanoma and desmoplastic melanoma, these are the two variants of malignant melanoma. Now we are going to discuss important skin lesions which are frequently asked in exam. One is sebaceous cyst. What is the other name of sebaceous cyst? It is also known as epidermal cyst, also known as epidermoid cyst. So the first is sebaceous cyst. Clear? What are the other names? It is also known as epidermal cyst, also known as epidermoid cyst. Now see why the name of this cyst is epidermal cyst, because it results from proliferation of epidermal cells, and this proliferation is implanted within the dermis, right? So it is going to result from proliferation of epidermal cells, proliferation of epidermal cells, okay? And these epidermal cells are implanted within the dermis. Now this term sebaceous cyst is a misnomer. Why? Because the origin of this cyst is not sebaceous, and second, even the content of cyst is not sebum. So what is the content? If you have seen a sebaceous cyst and you are going to press the sebaceous cyst, there is a punctum also. You will notice that there is cheesy or creamy material, white creamy material coming out. And what is that white creamy material? Yes, it is containing desquamated epithelial cells or keratin. So we press and this white creamy material comes out. So it's a misnomer. Sebaceous cyst, it's a misnomer. Why? because it's not of sebaceous origin, and second, the content is not sebum. So what is the content? What kind of content is there? So the content is white creamy material. And what is this white creamy material? This is desquamated cell or keratin. Clear? Sebaceous cyst is a type of retention cyst, and you know what is the meaning of retention cyst? Suppose there is a duct, and when the duct is blocked, the secretions are retained, or there are pent up secretions, and this is known as what? Retention cyst. One of the classical findings associated with sebaceous cyst is what? There is black colored punctum in the cyst. So can you see? This is a sebaceous cyst. You can see there is firm, round, flesh colored nodule. And this nodule is, can you see? It is having a punctum. So there is a punctum. Generally, most of the sebaceous cysts are containing punctum. But if sebaceous cyst is located in scalp or scrotum, so scalp sebaceous cyst and in scrotal sebaceous cyst, there is no punctum. So here you can see, this is a sebaceous cyst in scalp, there is no punctum, and can you see, there are multiple sebaceous cysts in the scrotum, can you see, and there is no punctum. So what are the important points related to sebaceous cyst? It is a type of retention cyst. It is a type of retention cyst, and there is punctum. Clear? But generally punctum is absent. Punctum, it's absent. This was asked in AIMS, it was asked in NEET, in scalp sebaceous cyst as well as in scrotal sebaceous cyst. So this is absent. What is the treatment? Generally, if you have attended the minor OT of surgery, almost on daily basis we are going to remove the sebaceous cyst. So what we do, we are going to excise the cyst along with its wall. So cyst is excised with its wall. Second situation, sometimes there is infected sebaceous cyst. So if a patient is having infected sebaceous cyst, in that case we go for incision and drainage. When infection subsides, inflammation subsides, so later we have to excise the wall of cyst to prevent the recurrence. So what is the management of sebaceous cyst? It's the excision with wall. Excision with wall of cyst. Clear? So this is the treatment of choice. And if there is infected sebaceous cyst, in that case, incision and drainage followed by excision of wall. Followed by excision of wall to prevent the recurrence. So this is how we manage the sebaceous cyst. Next is lipoma. Lipoma, if you break the term lipoma, it means it's a tumor containing fat cells. And what kind of fat cells are seen in lipoma? It is normal fat cells. Generally, lipoma is the most common subcutaneous neoplasm. Since it is most common subcutaneous neoplasm, this is also known as universal tumor. Okay, so see the important points related to lipoma. First, what is the other name? It is also known as universal tumor. Clear? Why? Because this is the most common subcutaneous neoplasm. It is most common subcutaneous neoplasm. Okay. You must have seen a patient of lipoma. Generally, what is the most common site? Yes, trunk. So the most common site is trunk. Right? So lipoma, tumor containing normal fat cells, and if you see, the tumor appears lobulated. Sometimes it is having bossylated appearance. See how it looks like. So see the special properties of lipoma. It is soft, it is fleshy, and we discuss it is lobulated, and here slip sign is positive. So what is slip sign? If the edge, this is the edge, if edge of lump is pressed, what? The swelling slips away from beneath the finger. Clear? So this is slip sign, which is positive in lipoma. There are multiple one-liner questions which are asked about variants of lipoma. See those important questions. Now see, these are the one-liner questions which are asked in relation to lipoma. First is Dercum's disease. So what is Dercum's disease? It is also known as adiposis dolorosa. And in this case, patient is having multiple painful lipomas. What kind of pain is seen in these patients? Yes, there is neuropathic pain. What kind of pain is there? There is neuropathic pain. Clear? Second question was asked in AIIMS in radio that on CT bracket calcification is seen in which lipoma? So in lipoma of corpus callosum, we are going to see what? Bracket calcification. So this bracket calcification is seen in lipoma of corpus callosum. Another very important question, that which lipomas are having maximum risk of malignancy, or which lipomas are generally malignant? So retroperitoneal lipomas, most of the retroperitoneal lipomas are malignant and there is maximum risk of malignancy. And in the whole body, there is only one site where we find the myxomatous degeneration. So this myxomatous degeneration is only seen in retroperitoneal lipoma. So these are important one-liner questions related to lipoma. What is the treatment of lipoma? We go for surgical excision. So what's the treatment? It's the surgical excision. Now see these two pictures, and what you are going to notice, you can notice that there is a swelling near outer angle of eye in close relation to the eyebrow. Can you see? Outer angle of eye in close relation to eyebrow, and this is the location of external angular process of frontal bone. So what is the name of this swelling? This is angular dermoid, and if specifically we are talking about these two, these are external angular dermoid. So we are going to discuss very important topic, angular dermoid, right? This angular dermoid is further divided into external and internal. Clear? External and internal. Which one is more common? External. In relation to external angular process of frontal bone, so we are going to discuss external angular dermoid. This is more common. Now you can see the location in relation to external angular process of frontal bone, and most commonly it is related to a suture. And what's the name of this suture? Here there is frontozygomatic suture. So it is in relation to frontozygomatic suture. So on examination you will find that it is painless. So what are the clinical findings? It's the painless swelling in the line of embryonic fusion. So first it's the painless swelling in the line of embryonic fusion. It is soft, smooth, non-tender, and fluctuant. Sometimes what's the problem? There is resorption or indentation of underlying bone. So sometimes there is resorption and indentation of underlying bone, and sometimes this swelling is attached to dura. So the treatment of choice of angular dermoid is surgical excision, but we have to rule out whether there is some attachment with dura or not. So which investigation is performed to rule out the attachment? CT. So generally treatment is surgical excision, but CT is done to rule out dural attachment. Rule out dural attachment. And what's the treatment of choice? The treatment of choice is surgical excision. Clear? This question was asked many times in AIIMS, in NEET, and in FMG. Now we are going to discuss the vascular anomalies of skin. Vascular anomalies of skin are asked both in surgery as well as in dermatology. So see this first condition, you can see it's a newborn baby, and this baby is having anomaly in the face. Clear? So can you see? And it's the area supplied by which nerve? The fifth cranial nerve, and that is trigeminal nerve. So what is the name of this condition? This condition is port wine stain. Now 2-3 important points. It's a stain, and you know you cannot remove a stain, so stain is going to persist. So this port wine stain, can you see? It is present at the time of birth, it grows along with child, doesn't regress, and generally it is seen in the face in which particular area supplied by trigeminal nerve or fifth cranial nerve. Clear? So see the important points. It's port wine stain, and you know stain persist. Clear? So first important point, it's present at birth. Clear? It grows along with child. It don't regress, it doesn't regress. Clear? So doesn't regress means it's permanent, and generally involving face. In face which particular area supplied by fifth cranial nerve or trigeminal nerve. Now tell me, what is the name of this condition? You can see it looks like strawberry, and it looks like strawberry, so the name of this condition is strawberry angioma. What is the name of this condition? It is strawberry angioma. Clear? So what is this strawberry angioma? It's a type of capillary hemangioma. In this case, the child is normal at birth, and generally this lesion appears by 1 to 3 weeks. And what happens? It is growing along with child till 1 year of age. But what is the good thing about strawberry angioma? That in 90% cases, there is spontaneous regression by 9 years of age. Since it's a vascular swelling, if you are going to press this swelling and remove the pressure, you will notice the emptying sign. Clear? So emptying sign is present. So what are the important points? First, the child is normal at birth, so it's not present at birth. So at what age it appears? Appears by 1 to 3 weeks after birth, right? And it grows along with child. It grows along with child till 1 year of age. 1 year of age. Clear? And what is the good thing? That in 90% cases there is spontaneous regression. By what age? By 9 years of age. Clear? Okay. And what is the sign? Positive emptying sign. This is a vascular swelling. So whenever we are going to press the swelling and remove the pressure, you will notice the emptying. So this is emptying sign, which is positive. Now again, in this newborn, you can see that there is one lesion. Can you see here? This is known as Salmon's patch. And can you see which area of body is involved? Here it is present at forehead. So what is the special feature of this Salmon's patch? That it is present at birth, and generally it is seen in the midline starting from this forehead till the occiput. What is the good thing? That in majority of cases there is spontaneous regression. So it disappears by 1 year of age. So this is Salmon's patch. What are the other names of Salmon's patch? This is Salmon's patch. It is also known as macular stain, also known as stork bite. Okay, stork is a bird. Now generally it is present at birth, and what is the site? It is present in the midline, usually where? Starting from forehead till occiput. Clear? And it regresses spontaneously by what age? By 1 year. There is spontaneous regression. Okay. So see the questions which are asked about these vascular anomalies of skin. First, which two lesions are present at birth? One is port wine stain and second is Salmon's patch. Out of these three, only one persists. And which one persists? Stain is going to persist. So it's the port wine stain which is going to persist. Strawberry angioma as well as Salmon's patch, both of these show the property of spontaneous regression. Now see, there are 4 one-liner questions which are asked almost every year in one exam. Almost every year. And what's the first? You can see here there is a sebaceous cyst of scalp and it is infected. So this condition is infected sebaceous cyst of scalp. This question was asked minimum 20 to 30 times. What's the name of this condition? And this condition is known as Cox peculiar tumor. So the name of this condition, it's the Cox peculiar tumor. This is first question. Now in these two pictures, what you can see here, can you see? There is osteomyelitis of skull bone. And which bone? You can see that there is osteomyelitis of frontal bone. Clear? So osteomyelitis of skull bones is known as Pott's-Puffy tumor. And which bone is most commonly involved? It is frontal bone. Clear? So this is Pott's-Puffy tumor. Name of this condition. Another very important question, Pott's-Puffy tumor, and it is characterized by osteomyelitis of skull bone in Karnataka. This question was asked, which bone? And most commonly it is which bone? It's the frontal bone. Clear? So this is Pott's-Puffy tumor in which there is osteomyelitis of frontal bone. That's why on clinical examination you will notice edema involving this forehead. Now see this. This is a benign hair follicle derived tumor. And what is the name of this benign hair follicle derived tumor? This is pilomatrixoma. What is the other name of pilomatrixoma? It is also known as calcifying epithelioma of Malheur. So the name of this condition, it is pilomatrixoma. Clear? And it is benign hair follicle derived tumor. Benign hair follicle derived tumor. The name is dangerous. What's the name? Calcifying epithelioma of Malheur. So the name of this condition is another name, calcifying epithelioma of Malheur. So in this condition, can you notice that there is piling of tissues like turban? Have you seen Rajasthani turban? So piling of tissues like turban, and this is known as what? Turban tumor. The other name of turban tumor is cylindroma. So the name of this condition is cylindroma, and this is also known as, it is known as turban tumor. Why it's known as turban tumor? Because there is piling of tissues one over another. So these are the four conditions. One is Cox peculiar tumor, second is Pott's-Puffy tumor, and third is pilomatrixoma, and fourth is cylindroma. These are very important, asked almost every year.